welcome.
Thank you.
We are very happy that you want to be interviewed. We are Marit and Sabine. We are from Time to Stand Up for Israel, and because of you are a new ambassador. Well, not new anymore, but for us more and new. We would like to hear your opinion because the situation in the world and in Holland, if you look to anti-Semitism, is rising sky high. So we like to hear your opinion and have a few questions.
Very happy.
Yeah.
Wow. I have to make a summary of 56 years in a few seconds. No, so I'm a career diplomat. I've been in the service for about 30 years. I took a couple of breaks for the private sector in between. I did many jobs. I started abroad in Budapest, New York, Washington, and then as ambassador to Italy, and now here. In Israel, I was privileged to work with many politicians. I worked with Prime Minister Rabin at the time that he was murdered, and then I worked with Prime Minister Peres, who replaced him, interim Prime Minister. Netanyahu, when he was first-time Prime Minister, I was the Chief of Staff of Avigdor Lieberman as Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I was in charge afterwards of Deputy Director General for European Affairs. So all Europe, NATO, EU. That's on the professional side. On the private life, I'm married. I have 4 kids and 4 grandchildren. 1 child with us, and the grown-ups are in Israel.
Oh, okay. Well, before you came to Holland, what did you do?
I've been, last posting until 2016, I've been ambassador to Italy.
Okay.
And when I came back from Italy, since I felt that I did any job I wished for in Israel in the headquarters, so I decided to take a 2-year unpaid leave, and I went to the private sector. I was dealing with innovation in venture capital and dealing with startups, and so.
Nice.
Security or?
No, not security. No, all kinds, and mainly I was sitting on the board of a company of medical device. I was sitting on IT companies. Security almost not at all.
Oh, okay.
Before you come to Holland, what you thought about the Netherlands?
So
that's serious.
it's not my first visit to the Netherlands. I've been here quite a few times. I've been here as a tourist. I've been here on visits. Netanyahu, when he visited, I think his first visit, I think it was '97. So I've been here with him, and since then a few times. I grew up on the generation that idealized Netherlands and the relations with Israel, in the 70s, 60s, 70s. For us, because of the oil boycotts after 73 war, Yom Kippur War, and then there was for me as a child, the World Cup, which I mentioned with Johan Cruyff, and losing to Germany at the final, the heartbreak of the 2-1 that I remember until today.
Me too.
Yeah, our generation. This is a question of generation, I guess. So I grew up on this. I knew that I'm not coming to the same relations. I had no illusions because since then, as I said, I've been there. I've been here quite a lot. And I know Europe.
But next question is not.
So no, I think that the relations today are what I would call, I don't know if it's good or bad, are normal relations, more normal relations in the sense of more close to what you would find with European countries. So maybe I think that the Netherlands is still in the upper scale of the approach to Israel. Not.
Oh yes, you think so?
I think so. It's not. We have some countries who are very strong supporters of Israel. I prefer not to say countries, but names. But probably people know a few countries who are very supportive of Israel and protective of Israel. There are a few countries which are very hostile to Israel, and they are in the middle. and the Netherlands is in the upper middle, I think, of these countries
Okay.
when it comes to Israel. So there are things here that the other countries did not do. So there are good things. I mean, so it's it changes, depends on the coalition, on the topic, it's
Yeah.
not something that is.
Yeah, that's true.
Are you not concerned about? It looks like for me, as a Dutch person, I lived also a lot abroad. It looks that Israel is getting less and less positive image in the world, and especially in Holland.
I think that there is a problem in Europe.
Yeah.
I think that there is a problem, especially in Europe. Somehow, the European basic approach is based on the weak should be supported, because they look at Israel as if the only conflict in the eyes of many Europeans is the Israeli-Palestinian issue. So they are not looking, maybe opening the lens a little bit wider and looking at the Middle East, what's happening.
Yes.
When you look at the size of the Middle East, Israel, a country of 9 million people, half the size of the Netherlands, with just over 6 million Jews. The numbers around us, the size, the militaries, is enormous. We are really a point on the map. In most maps, there is not enough space inside Israel. We are in the Mediterranean where they write our name. And we always joke, black humor, that we have two options: either to fight for our survivability or to learn to swim. And it's a long swim to Cyprus, which is the closest
Exactly.
the
So
closest shore. So
you have to fight.
So
Yeah.
you have to fight. But I think that this element of not understanding really the context, the history, a lot of misinformation and disinformation. Ignorance, ignorance is, I think, one of our biggest enemies, because people don't know the history. They think that there was ever a Palestinian state. So you start from this point. Everyone is saying conquered. The point that there was never ever in history a Palestinian state. The fact that, for example, if you speak also of maybe the historical ties, Jerusalem was never a Muslim capital. Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran even once. Jerusalem in the Bible is hundreds of times in different names. So it's not that they give it one name. So there are different names that we're giving from Zion to Jerusalem, Jerusalem. So there are enormous number of names. You understand that historically, but not only, also practically, there was never a Palestinian state. And in the time, and that's what people don't understand, that when they speak of 67 borders, which are really the 49 borders, it's the end of the War of Independence, where Israel was invaded by regular militaries when Israel did not have or just created the first military. The first time we had a military which was trying to create with very little abilities. All that is a border that was decided in war, and why is this border, for example, more sacred than the border that was created after the 6-Day War? So, because this is the war that I liked, and this is the war I liked less. So there is a lot of, I think, of ignorance, and even the territories, the so-called territories, Judea and Samaria, who were controlled by the Jordanians from between 49 to, or before, but until 67, we should say, even them never gave the Palestinians a state. So it was never an issue there, nor Gaza under Egypt, the same situation. So in general, there is a lot of misconcept, as if there were Palestinians living there for centuries, and then the Ashkenazi Jews, the ones from Europe, and that Israel, another myth that Israel is like a reward that was given to the Jews after the Holocaust. Well, we all remember that my father was born, by the way, in Germany. I am from European origin. But we have to remember that even after the Holocaust, the British mandate was stopping Jews from coming to Israel. So the great help that they speak about was not exactly great support and help.
You visited regularly recently HaKarmel and Dam Square. And as you might know, Time to Stand Up for Israel has been on Dam Square fighting against the BDS and the negative image of Israel in Amsterdam, but in Holland. And for 3.5 years, 2 years every week, every Sunday, and 1.5 year every 2 weeks after the municipality said you are not allowed anymore. Now the municipality says the demonstrations are not allowed anymore. Also not the one-person protest. What is your opinion about that a guy is standing on Dam Square spreading lies and hatred towards Israel?
Yeah, of course, my opinion is very clear. It's very obvious. The fact that I went there and asked my good friend and colleague, the American ambassador, to join me.
Very nice.
I think that this is it's fueling the fire, and it's not, they are not. It's not anti-Israel. So I can accept legitimate criticism of Israel as long as it's fair.
Yeah,
and
as long as it's fair.
It's fair and the same treatment to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem with criticism. I don't like it, but I have no problem. I understand that this is part of the democratic game in which we live and play, and it's okay. We enjoy the democracy. We have to enjoy all sides of it. But this is, on the one hand, what's happening in Dam Square, in my eyes, is very far from this.
Yeah.
What we see there is fueling of delegitimization of Israel. So it's not saying that Israel is doing this or that. It's the whole existence. If you see the maps, and still the Palestinians are all the time showing the maps, that once, or in their eyes, many people say, Palestine is what Israel is. So they take the map of Israel, they write Palestine.
Yes.
So if this is your approach, in your eyes, there is no place for a Jewish state. So we have in the world more than 50 Muslim states. We have states that I would not call them Christian states, but there are many states who see themselves as Christian-oriented, based in Europe and other places. So in the whole world, 20,000 square kilometers, where the Jewish people can live safely after they were persecuted over the centuries in any place.
Yeah.
The Jews had hardly any safe place in the world. We know what happened in Europe, and Europe did not start with the Holocaust. You can go back to the 1500s, to the Inquisition.
Yes,
so for years the Jews were rioted against in all countries, by the way, all countries. It's not one that was. It was an approach. We know what happened in the Middle East with the riots, with the Faroud in Iraq, and just yesterday, my good friend David Harris from American Jewish Committee put about the story of his wife who had to flee after the riots in '67 in Libya. His wife was a Jewish Libyan lady. So you understand that wherever the Jews were, they were unsafe. Most places there were some safe havens. So once we have a state, we are delegitimized to have this small piece of land, historic land for us also. And this is part, I think, of a new wave of anti-Semitism. But this is one element. There is also, from the Dam Square, the way I see it, it's also fueling for other people, bypasses, who are not informed. When they see the Magen David, they don't understand the difference between Israel and the Jews of the Netherlands. So it's also fueling, directly or indirectly, also anti-Semitism inside the Netherlands. So it's anti-Semitism approach towards Israel, anti-Semitic approach, and inside fueling also here. So I think it's a really bad idea, this demonstration. It's not a naive, simple event, not at all. No. And I'm happy that it will be stopped. I am ready. I don't know if you are, but I think that it's fair enough to say let's treat Israel as a normal country.
Yes.
Not against Israel and not for Israel daily demonstrations. If there is an occasion you want to demonstrate on a topic, you have a problem, the pro-Israel or the anti-Israel, let's do it on not as an obsession.
No.
Let's do it as on case basis.
This is an obsession.
I'm so happy you say this.
Of course.
Because our opinion is we fought to get those persons rid of the Dam Square, first with papers writing to the municipality, then we go, okay, when they are there, we are here. But I think there is no place for any politics on the Dam Square in front of the 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 dam, the monument of
Monument, but I think they spread hate.
Yeah, I'm happy you say that. I agree with you.
And what you think of this theater of hate, and do you think Israel could play a role in preventing this kind of hate speech?
I will say that I really think, first of all, usually diplomats are not supposed to be involved with internal, and it's important to understand because I want to explain something about it. Usually, a diplomat would not go into politics of the country where he is or to internal affairs of the country. I think that there is one exception that I see as a diplomat where I feel that it's my duty to be involved. It's when I see anti-Semitism. I think that we cannot, the Jewish state was built as a home for the Jewish people as in the Declaration of Independence, but part of the responsibility is the shared responsibilities of the Jews of the diaspora to Israel, but at the same time, and they helped Israel a lot. Many immigrated, but many stayed in their countries and supported Israel. But at the same time, Israel has the responsibility to be never again, as we say. So preventing any bad things from happening to the Jews wherever they are. And I think in this, and again, by still respecting the inner, and I think, by the way, let's speak about anti-Semitism for a second. I think that in the Netherlands, in general, you started in the opening and spoke about anti-Semitism. Maybe we speak about Europe and the world. The further we get away from the Holocaust, and now we are 75 years from the end, it becomes less politically incorrect to be anti-Semite. So as the closer we were to the Holocaust, people felt very uncomfortable because the story was fresh. But they are now third generations, or I don't know, third generations probably. And it's becoming a far story, not connected to us. What is it's our great grandfather or grandfather, and what is it connected to us? Some are like this.
Yes.
And I think that in this, the Netherlands is a little bit unique in the sense that still here, it's politically, people who are anti-Semite, that speak in an anti-Semitic way, are not well received. I think still the norm, this is the way I see it, because I have, what you look at the Netherlands, I look at Europe.
Yes.
I have a European vision because I dealt with all of Europe. I think that here it's really out of the consensus. There are people who are anti-Semitic, not to misunderstand, but it's not politically correct. The politician here, who is anti-Semite, is a problem for him. It's not something that is if you're openly, if you speak in a way, and. I think this is and we heard, by the way, very interesting, I think, both the king in Dam Square and the Prime Minister in Amsterdam in the memorial. I think that they took responsibility and said very important things. So it's important that also the leadership, and by the way, when we read the Flemish press, I cannot say the same about anti-Semitism being politically incorrect.
That's true.
So it's a some there I do see. So if I see in Dutch paper, in Dutch-speaking papers, it comes usually from there, open anti-Semitism, or something that I see as open anti-Semitism. So I think this is an issue that is increasing in Europe. Corona now, this is, in the science is defined anti-Semitism as a phobia, like a mental issue that people have that is not explainable. It's not something that makes sense. So we have now a coronavirus that grew up, or probably the source is China.
Yes.
So there is probably consensus, and somehow the Jews are to be blamed. I don't know how, but this probably connected to the phobia declaration of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
So if Israel is saying we are working now on a medicine or an antidote, so immediately people say, if the Israelis are working, it means that they are the ones who planted it to start with.
Yeah,
you understand
whatever you do.
And you see the big debate now in the United States about the movement of Black Lives Matters and somehow portraying now the Jews on the bad side. So the Jews were persecuted all over for many years. I just saw on Twitter a very interesting piece of Karim Abdul-Jabbar, the former NBA star. I love basketball. I played basketball, and he replied to others who tried to portray the Jews as part of the people who caused the problems for the Afro Americans in the United States, and he came against it. He came very strongly against it. I still remember him when he was Lou Elsino. He converted to Islam and changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was a great player, Los Angeles Lakers, and you see that he's a great guy. So he's not young anymore. It's like probably in the 70s or reaching it, but a great personality. So he came out very bravely. Jews have been on the victim side and trying to portray us as the oppressor. Even, by the way, even in South Africa during the apartheid, the Jews were usually the liberals who were fighting alongside to try and have equal rights.
Yes.
So many Jews were imprisoned because of that, and also with Martin Luther King in the United States in the movement, there were many Jews there in his movement. So because they were always feeling the same, they were immigrants and oppressed, not because of necessarily the color of the skin, but because of their religion or belief. So it's a different kind, but it's the same. At the end, for the person, it's the same.
Hate is hate.
Hate is hate.
You are a diplomat, you cannot talk too much about internal politics, I understand. But can we do as pro-Israel groups, let's say we unite, that's a dream of me, all the pro-Israel grassroots groups. Do you have idea that can we change something? Can we do something? Do you have an idea about that?
I will start by saying about interference. Where do you see the interference? So it will not be a clear interference into Israeli politics per se. So usually, very few would come and say, "I'm for this candidate, to that candidate. I'm for this." This is not. But where do you see the interference? You see that Israel really is a very strong democracy, stronger than some of the European countries, or many of the European countries. I would say the institutions. The High Court of Justice, the legal system are very, very strong. I mean, how many countries put in jail for different reasons a president or a prime minister or a minister of finance and others? So, it's not that we don't have corruption, or problems. As you said, everyone has corruption and problems, but we are taking care of it, and we don't stop because it's someone who is politically powered, or it's not an obstacle. And the court just a few weeks ago overruled a parliament resolution on legalizing some houses that were built on private land. So the court is there is the check of balance. You dislike, okay, but this is a lively system, democratic system, as it should happen. Maybe too lively, 3 elections in 1.5 of the last 1.5 years. But in general, this is the system. Now Europeans, they go and they invest, including the Dutch government, they invest a lot of money into NGOs. And these NGOs, all of them are very specific NGOs. These are NGOs that are coming, all of them almost, without any exception, dealing with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict from a very certain point of view. So it's a very complex, in my eyes, a very complex issue. And trying to say, and the Dutch government is saying it, by the way, we are not giving money to BDS activity. We are against boycotting Israel. It's true, maybe, but then you give to an organization that does nice things that you like on the one hand, and in the other hand, from the same pocket, he's doing BDS activities. So how can you make sure, or why should you make sure? Anyhow, the money is going into the bank. You know that even if they're not using it directly, it's the same bank account. So it's a little bit hypocrisy of countries to come and say, no, this money is only for human rights. The issue of BDS, I know they do it, but it's not. I don't support it. So it's not something one can say. So I think in this there has to be and I must at the same time say about the Dutch government that the decision not to fund directly anymore the Palestinian Authority because of paying money to murderers according to how much they killed, because the sentence,
pay to slay.
the sentence is of how long they are in prison will influence
The money.
the height of the salary. So
The money.
doing that, and it was the parliament, it was Sigrid Kach. I think that they did a very big thing here, a very strong message. Another good thing that I must commend, not connected to internal issues, is the fact that from 2004, the Netherlands was one of the pioneers when it comes to Hezbollah, to say there are no two Hezbollahs. There is one Nasrallah who is controlling both the military and the political side. And you know, this game of we are not talking to the military, the terrorist side, let's say, of Hezbollah, only to the political side, this is a joke. It's a proxy of Iran. And at least the Netherlands here was very strong, and I hope, and now Germany passed something now, recently. So you see, the Netherlands was much before, and again, it has to be put into legislation in a very European strong way, making clear that Hezbollah is out of the game. So there are good things, and there are less good things, and we are trying to, you know, to...
Well, it was very painful to see the Sigrid Kaag 6 million euros donation to the UN UNRWA. And without the consent of the parliament. For me, as I'm breaking my mind about it, what can we do as pro-Israel groups? I don't think we can do a lot as other than create awareness, maybe.
First of all, UNRWA is a big issue, and this is part of setting the history right, because after Second World War, there were many refugees in many countries, and the idea was to create a Human Rights Commission, and the Refugee Agency, and settle, and the idea in Europe, because many people found themselves not in their countries at the end of the war, so the borders were moved, victory and loss of the war, and the idea was to settle the refugees where they were. So if a German would find himself after the war in Czechoslovakia at the time, so he would become a Czech citizen and not move, or no changes. But then the Arab countries did not want to have this situation of the refugees that were there, the Palestinian refugees, to become citizens. Until today, in some of the countries in Lebanon, in Syria, they don't have equal rights until today. So what did the Arab countries do? They created, a few days after the Refugee Agency, they created UNRWA. And the mandate of UNRWA was exactly the opposite. Bring back the refugees to their homes. Exactly the opposite of what was decided in Europe. Now people don't know that. People also don't know that the number of Jewish refugees from the Muslim world who had to escape after riots and leaving as refugees, most of them as refugees, leaving a lot of their belongings behind, property and everything, the number was about 850,000 Jews. Out of which about 600,000 came to the young Israel, and we absorbed them, we wanted them. We were a very poor country. In the 50s, there was no food in Israel. There were rations of food. So the country was really struggling to absorb these people. And in 48, the population in Israel was 600,000. So we more than doubled, you know, you have to absorb more. And then 250,000 went around the world. The number of Palestinian refugees, when Jews were 850, it's placed around 600 or maybe 650,000 refugees. So the number of Jews is much higher. What happened today? You would not speak of any Jewish refugee in the world, because either they're Israelis, or maybe they are Dutch today, or they are Italians, or Americans, or British.
Not the internal refugees.
No one is referring to them as refugees. The Palestinians, they have a very unique system. One of the things you can inherit to your son is the refugee status. So now UNRWA is dealing with 5 million people, more or less. And you know, anyone who is for peace and thinks that there can be a solution, a two-state solution, let's say, how can a Palestinian leader agree or say yes when he is representing, now it's a 3-state solution, because Hamastan in Gaza, it's a different state. So let's speak now about Abu Mazen controlling 2 million people, 2.5 million people in Judea and Samaria. How can he have the legitimacy now if there are 5 million abroad refugees, and another in Gaza, another big bunch in Gaza. So how can he speak in there? What legitimacy does Abu Mazen or Arafat before him, or to speak of the so-called right of return? There is no right of return, but that's the phrase they use. So, you know, we at the minority, he can say, the leader, I can say to the majority abroad, no, don't come back in. And some of these UNRWA refugees are already American citizens for second generation, third generation,
Yes.
so, or maybe even in the Netherlands, and they're still considered as part of UNRWA. So UNRWA, instead of solving the problem, is really maintaining the problem and making it impossible to solve. At the same time, they are feeding people. My complaint, and so money is going really to feed and educate. We have a lot of problems, as you know, probably about, for example, they have an education system and the books there are inciting against Israel, against Jews. So there are many, many problems. I'm not going even into the complexity of this organization. But I would say one thing about UNRWA. You know, old smart old people said, if you give them a fish, they will eat a dinner. If you give them a fishing rod, they will eat many dinners. And I think this is part of the problem. Instead of trying to settle them in Lebanon where they are and help the Lebanese government, give the Lebanese government assistance, give the Jordanian government assistance, give the Syrian government assistance. They are there. I mean, you don't need to give the American government assistance to settle the Palestinians who are living in the United States, okay? But give these countries in the region and you can solve maybe many, many more problems than every time feeding them and bringing food aid to them. And this is, I think, the problem of concept about UNRWA. The symbolic key of the house in Haifa goes from father to son to grandson to, you know, they have this. So it's really, if you build such a narrative, it's so much more complicated to solve the problems. Because it becomes a fight of narratives, not only of real people on the ground, and this becomes an issue. But by the way, you asked before, and I didn't answer about the network. So I'm sure you're connected to others in Europe. You know the topics. I mean, many of the topics are cross-European. So Hezbollah is a cross-European issue.
Yes.
UNRWA is a cross-European. Funding of NGOs is a cross-European issue. Iran problems are cross-European. So all these issues, it has to be, and many times the decision has to be made at the European level. So each group has to influence its own government in order to create this critical mass to change things in Brussels as a union.
Would you consider it a good action to move the Dutch embassy to Jerusalem?
First of all, I think it was a bad move to move it out of Jerusalem. One of my problems, because it was in Jerusalem in the past, people are not aware that many embassies were there. One of my problems is it's going to be a long answer, so we'll finish it with a long answer. I'll tell you, where do I see the European? Speaking of informing the people, where do I see the hypocrisy of the world? And the Europeans are leading it. When we did Oslo with the Palestinians, there were 6 issues. I'm putting water aside because Israeli desalinization technology created solutions for it. So there were 5 issues that were put in Oslo. It was what kind of Palestinian entity, the 5 final status questions. What the entity, the borders, Jerusalem, the questions of security, and the question of refugees. These were the 5 topics. And then the Europeans gave. It's not theirs to give, but gave a promise, or the expectation of the Palestinians is to have a state. What is the entity? The border 67, Europe already promised 67 borders, and Jerusalem, East Jerusalem is the form of future capital. So that's what Europe said, okay? And then the topics that are important for Israel were left aside, which is the question of the refugees and the security arrangements. Security, by the way, can be also connected to territory if we speak of Trump plan and everything. So, so to say security, I can tell you, I'm for your security. What are you doing for my security? It's not, speaking is very nice. Security is not, although in Europe, in a pacifistic approach, there is this thought that you can speak your security. No, security is a question of means and actions. And if you don't give me the ability to defend myself, nothing will help. Nothing will help. And this is very important. And then that's why I'm coming out to Jerusalem. So where is the second hypocrisy? The second hypocrisy is that Europeans already promised the Palestinians East Jerusalem as your future capital. Okay?
Yeah.
So what is the problem to put the embassy in West Jerusalem? The Americans, by the way, put it in West Jerusalem, so-called. So even by your plan, which will never happen, but in your plan, in your perception, Jerusalem, West Jerusalem is legitimately the capital. We declared our capital.
Yeah.
No one can tell us, you decided that your capital is Amsterdam, although you have a very strange arrangement with The Hague. But you decided that it's Amsterdam. It's not that someone can come to you and tell you, no, Amsterdam is not your, and so Jerusalem is our capital. We declared it. Historically, it's our capital. And there is no logic. You know, I would understand if someone will say, well, I will put the embassy only in Western Jerusalem, so-called Western Jerusalem. Okay, I can live with it. Also, the Americans put it in, so they're not to be in the conflict. But the Americans, even for putting it there, were criticized.
Yes.
Why? Because with the Palestinians, you would go and do activities in order to give them legitimacy in East Jerusalem. That the Europeans do every time. I remember when I was in charge of European affairs, they made the point of going to the Orient House to meet the Palestinian leaders who are in Ramallah, really. They used to pull them to Jerusalem to make a point that's East Jerusalem. So if you make the point for the Palestinians, you know, which I'm totally against, but why aren't you fair enough to make the same point to Israel?
Yes.
Why isn't your embassy in West Jerusalem, so-called West? I mean, I'm using, it will never happen. 67 borders in Jerusalem would never work, okay? It's not going down. But still, if you are saying that this is your line, 67, and you are supporting the Palestinians on East Jerusalem, why aren't you doing the same thing for Israel and West Jerusalem? So there is a lot of hypocrisy that we have to live with. And you started and said, and I'll maybe stop by that, finish by this. Israel is a very strong country. It's strong because its people are strong, because we don't have an alternative. Our alternative is swimming, as we said in the beginning. So, and I swim well, but I think that Cyprus is beyond. But I think that Cyprus is still beyond my capacity of swimming. So I have no alternative. And that's why I went to military. I was a paratrooper. My children, we are 3 brothers, 3 officers. My 2 sons were officers, so they stayed more time in the military. My daughter was not an officer, but stayed more. Our youngest is going in 2 years to military. So in general, it's not for us, it's a duty that I want to do, because I understand that this is the only thing that will keep me safe. And by the way, in a way, keep also the world diaspora Jews also safe. Because without Israel, the situation, on the one hand, people will say that because of Israel, there's anti-Semitism. Now to say that it's because of Israel, it's just using a case saying, we are not anti-Jew. Anti-Semitism existed for centuries. We know that. And now people are trying to explain their hatred toward Jews as disagreement with Israel on politics. No, it's not this. This is not the case. So Israel is used to explain anti-Semitism. It's not creating anti-Semitism. And I think that the existence of Israel is really protecting Jews because everyone knows that Israel is on the alert when it comes to anti-Semitism. We cannot accept it. It's something that for me, this is maybe the most important part of my work. The way I see it, because of my history, my family history, I think for me it's like an order. It's not something that I do because I decide to do. It's something that I do because I must do, as from inside. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, and continue doing the great job that you are doing to defend Israel in the streets or in the social networks or wherever.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. We hope. Yes.